Good morning, everyone. I'm here, this is Tele-Aviacion. I am reporting to you from San Salvador. Just got here last night, and we are at the Pato Corrales Spa and Resort here in San Salvador, very close to the Comalapa Airport. It's a very, very beautiful place. They have a lot of beautiful monkeys and all sorts of incredible natural things. Right out our window are some bananas. It's really, really nice. But I wanted to talk about a lot of the news that's coming out of El Salvador. Of course, most of it has to do with Bitcoin and a secrecy around the amount of Bitcoin and amount of money that the government has in their treasury, and just, intrigue. That's the big thing. It's like, oh, this country, there's some sort of, they're trying to fool the world, or it's hard to know what they're saying. But just to segue this and put it into a little bit of perspective, let's consider what the United States has done as far as the Federal Reserve. Okay, now obviously this is the Federal Reserve that we have right now, started in 1913 under Woodrow Wilson. That was actually the third. There were other attempts at a Federal Reserve that didn't work so well. There were many, many presidents and political parties that did all they could to destroy the ability for a Federal Reserve to happen. They wanted to go back to the what they call the greenback, which is what was happening during the time of Lincoln administration. But what ended up, ultimately, the Federal Reservists won. I guess there was a big argument between Hamilton, who was a reservist, and then other political forces that were against it. And the reason that they were against it is because what happened is the whole idea of the revolution for the United States was that we would have sovereignty from the rest of the world, that England would not be involved, that no other countries. Well, the fact of the matter is the Federal Reserve is shrouded in secrecy. There's an incredible amount of secrecy. Nobody really knows. There's been calls to audit the Fed. Rand Paul and his son have talked about auditing the Fed, but we know nothing is going to be done on that because it is shrouded in secrecy. When we talk about public debt, trillions of public debt, trillions of private debt, nobody even really talks about the issue of what actually is the debt. We know, we have an idea. There's the debt clock that we can get ideas of the national debt, but nobody really knows how everything is handled and what way the paperwork is handled. Nobody knows what's going on. It's totally shrouded in secrecy. Perhaps if the world were to fully understand what is on the books of the Federal Reserve, it may actually destabilize the whole thing. People would understand, oh my God, it's all built on a house of cards and it could all collapse. So nobody really, the government is not pushing to handle this issue, even though there are several forces that are. Why do I get to this? Well, consider all the things that are being said about El Salvador. Shrouded in secrecy. Buying Bitcoin. Have they spent any of the Bitcoin? Are they selling it? Are they just hoarding it? And then saying, oh, it's a horrible investment. Well, of course, the difference, I'm just trying to think, what is the difference by their rationale, by the so-called pundits of El Salvador, the New York Times, LA Times, by their rationale, what is it that they really want? Are they applying those same standards to the Federal Reserve, our own Federal Reserve? When our own Federal Reserve prints trillions of dollars extra, are they applying the same standards to that they would El Salvador? That's the question. What kinds of standards? Do they have standards? Is it just a word? Maybe standards, maybe everything is just words and nothing actually really means anything. It's just you figure, hey, the LA Times, New York Times says something bad, it must be true. Maybe that's the way it is. Maybe it doesn't even, maybe the words are just tokens or something. Well, I'm trying to operate in a world of reality where words actually mean something. And so let's look at the Federal Reserve. Again, they did, a lot of people, a lot of our founding fathers did all they could. I think one of the last big presidents to fight against the Federal Reserve and successful was Andrew Jackson. I'm not saying he was a great man, I'm just saying that was the situation. But when it finally came into being, the Federal Reserve, if you really look at it, has more than, in so many ways, has really created problems with the military-industrial complex. I'm always going to come back to that. In fact, The military-industrial complex and the Federal Reserve are synonymous with each other. They just are. That's the way it's been ever since the beginning, ever since World War I happened. And they needed to be able to get money. They needed to be able to print money. Mind you, back in those days, at least money was backed by something, backed by gold. But the beginnings of what we have now, the inflationary spiral, the debt spiral, the ability to print lots of currency, it started then. And with every war, it kept increasing. Now, why do we get into war? Well, I guess they say there are good wars and there are bad wars. But in between these wars, there are always individuals that profit from it. If you've heard of the original banking magnates back in Europe, the way that they operated is often the same members. The Rothschilds had people in England, had people in Europe, had people in France, all relatives, and all contributing to the war and loaning money to these countries for the war effort, even though they were all on opposing sides. Well, if you think that this isn't going on today, you're naive, because it is going on today. In international finances, we just don't hear about it. And every once in a while, we cross into the issues where, let's say, Chase Bank is indicted on some money laundering issue, or some other, or I think Deutsche Bank is, and it's all related. And what happens? That's their business model. They get fined $1 billion, even though they've made $1 trillion. It doesn't matter. It's just another day. No problem. But this is the way that it's worked. So here we have this Federal Reserve that basically, and not just, and there's all sorts. The World Bank, the IMF, all of them are beholden to the international, I should say, the military-industrial complex. Now, in Bitcoin, we have proof of work, which has been explained. I know that you can research it. In the United States, we have proof of war. And proof of war meaning that if you do anything to try to deflate or destroy our currency, or just even challenge our currency in any way, we will destroy you through war. And that is what, when the Federal Reserve prints all of this money, it is backed up by the threat of war. So they could say, oh, well, that just happens to be, that's just a pleasant happenstance. We didn't mean it that way. Bullshit. They know very well what it is, and the military-industrial complex is backed up by those forces, and we know it. They know it. Everybody knows it. The Federal Reserve, just they all work together in concert. So since they do this really represents a rather wide conspiracy. If you really consider the implications of this. This is a really, really big conspiracy. It makes you understand why they're making such a big deal about El Salvador. Such a little bitty country that has 2,600 or whatever Bitcoins that they've purchased. Not even a tenth, not maybe 3% of what Michael Saylor or Elon Musk have in Bitcoin. I mean, this is a small country. They don't even have close to what Elon Musk and Michael Saylor have, but it doesn't matter. They make this big issue. I guess it's just a symbolic, the symbology of Bitcoin, even if El Salvador has such a very, very small portion of it, the mere symbology of it, the fact that they're even investing in it, is such a big issue that the world has to make out of it to make sure that they squash the possibility of Bitcoin. And the idea that somehow El Salvador is beholding to give up all of their financial secrets, to let the world know and open up their treasury and let the world know exactly what they have. Why? So that the world can exploit it and take advantage of them and destroy them. That's what it's for. El Salvador doesn't have to give up its sovereignty and give up all of its financial secrets and tell the world. It doesn't owe the world shit. El Salvador doesn't owe anything. It owes it to itself. What is he trying to do for the people? And that's what you have to look at. Nobody cares about El Salvador. Nobody even began to think about El Salvador until Bitcoin. Now all of a sudden it's really important. Now all of a sudden human rights. Where the hell were the people during the wars in the 80s talking about human rights? Yeah, a couple of people in the left parties were talking about human rights. The major newspapers were just making it sound like, no big deal. Come on, it's a banana republic, whatever. That was their attitude then. Now all of a sudden they're really concerned about human rights. And again, this is strictly coming from the Federal Reserve and the military-industrial complex. And they're all over the world, and they're in league with all the NATO countries as well. Again, proof of war. Every country that joins the United States in NATO, I know that they consider that they are saving themselves from communism, and they are helping the world somehow. They're helping their country and their citizenry. But all they're doing is backing up a failed experiment, monetary experiment that the United States is working on, experimenting on everybody. There is a limit to how many trillions that can be printed and printed before finally everything goes bust. That is the whole reason for Bitcoin. And of course, it is in their interest to do everything they can to destroy Bitcoin. It's in their interest to do it. It should be self-evident that it's in their interest to do it. I mean, for heaven's sakes, the rich, I mean, the way that it works is when they print all these trillions of dollars, ultimately goes to the richest people in the United States, get to take out these free, practically no interest loans, for which they buy up all the real estate and charge exorbitant rents. I mean, obviously it can't go on forever like this, but they buy as many, all the luxury products, the yachts, all the durable goods, and ultimately the super rich end up with everything. That's the way our current system is working. That's the way it's working. And all of a sudden, a president in El Salvador and Berate, and I apologize, I should mention that because that's a really important issue. But the world seems to really be centric on Bukele. But to actually, for any president to actually push the idea of a sovereign currency that he absolutely has no control over, all he can do is buy it. And it doesn't always work in his favor. He buys it and it goes down. I mean, Bitcoin it's gone up far more than it's ever gone down, but boy, when it goes down, it really does. And mostly, I believe, because the Federal Reserve has done all they can to push it down and to figure out through their plunge protection team. If you listen to our previous episodes, as I've discussed those, they take that plunge protection team and do all they can to destroy. They destroy the price of gold. They've been doing that for years. Silver, precious metals. They'll do that to any commodity in the world that they can. They have the ability, they can buy it down. They're literally buying it down. You're thinking, how can they do that? They have their ways. Believe me, they buy it down just the way that they can buy down every other currency. Again, they go over to Saudi Arabia and they say everybody who buys oil has to buy it with U.S. currency. And so then if they have francs, they say, I'm sorry, we're doubling it. We're doubling the amount of francs you have to put because we're saying your currency is now much lower. Why? Because we say we're charging more for our rates now, for our exchange rates. That's it. It's that simple. There are limits to it. Obviously, if you do too much, if you ask for too much, you're going to create real serious problems. But they know just how much to ask for. And this is how they're able to buy down everything. This is the way they're able to buy down Bitcoin, through other similar methods. They have their ways. They've had hundreds of years to figure out their ways. This is how it's done. So again, why does El Salvador have any responsibility to try to justify what it's doing in Bitcoin? To try to be able to prove to the world that it's being absolutely fair? Well, let every other freaking Western country, let Western Europe prove that it's being fair. When all the NATO companies expanded through all of Europe, when it was promised in the 80s that they wouldn't expand 1 inch, and then they expand through all the complete Europe until every part of the Russian border is crowded by NATO. And then, of course, Russia goes to war as a result, because they've been warning them for 20 years, over 20 years, not to do this. And nobody wanted to talk to them. Finally, they went to war. That's what countries do. That's what this country would do if Russian forces were working with Mexico and working with Canada. We would be a war. We would have our own war against Mexico and Canada if that were the case. That's just freaking common sense. That's the way countries are. I'm not saying it's right. That's just the way they are. So the question is, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to believe? Well, I can tell you, every single Western source, especially New York Times, Al Jazeera, Wall Street Journal, they continually quote El Faro. They may not even say it. Eventually they do. Maybe every third article they mention El Faro, according to this. Or they source some sort of article that sources some sort of a special report. And then you do it and you find out where was it given? El Faro. And who is El Faro? They're simply a product of George Soros. Their main amount of money that supports what they do comes from George Soros because he wants to have control. He's part of this liberal left that wants to freaking control everything. And so are we to believe what they have to say? We have to realize everything they say, first of all, from the absolute inception of their ideas, is based on nothing. It's just based on hearsay and phony evidence. And that's what's happening. But this is the press that we have. And again, I stress, El Salvador does not owe the world any explanation of what it's doing with Bitcoin. No explanations whatsoever. Anyway, I leave you with this. I'm here. I'm going to be reporting throughout the week. I'm going to be heading to La Union today. And it was been a pleasure. You can see I've got these gibbons monkeys behind me. I've been kind of watching them over here at this beautiful place. And I wish all of you the best. Today is Sunday, July the 3rd. And a happy 4th of July, by the way. Bye-bye.